Prune to Grow Consulting and Counseling Services. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about the book of Esther. So a lot of people have heard and maybe have even done a Bible study regarding Esther's created for a time such as these type of feeling. And that is all well and good, and we will touch on that today. But I also wanted to bring a little context into the story of Esther to sort of get a broader picture of what Esther was actually going through when she made that decision to rise up to, the times such as these type of moment. So let's see. First of all, Esther was an orphan, which we learned that her parents had both passed away and her uncle took her into his home. So that's horrible circumstance, number one, that she was an orphan. She lost her parents. It didn't say if she had siblings or not, so we can't really tell if she had lost siblings or been separated from them. So that's one thing. And then basically the current queen of Persia at the time had insulted her husband, the king. And so the king was just done with her, and he held a beauty pageant in the land to find a new queen. Well, it sounds nice, in our Western culture, we think of beauty pageants as something sort of fun and sexy, and you get to win a crown and flowers and everyone adores you type of thing. But this was a different circumstance. So the beauty pageant was held for the king of Persia to be able to take his lot, basically take all the virgins that they rounded up in the area that they looked for, all the beautiful women, and bring him into his harem, which basically means that he went through each of these ladies one by one and deflowered them, and then they were just living in his castle or grounds or whatever in the harem. And if he ever chose to call for them to basically have a night with them again, then so be it. But a lot of times these ladies would sleep with him the one night and then never see him again. So if you think of it like that, once Esther was brought into the harem for the king, all of her hopes of any type of future, any dreams of marrying and becoming a mother or anything like that, I mean, culturally, that would be her, future, basically, to get married and to have children. But all of that would have been out the window for her. Perhaps she would have gotten pregnant by the king, maybe. So in that case, then she would be a mother. And then again, if he found favor in her, then he may bring her in more than once. But when she won that beauty pageant, she basically was probably thinking that, okay, well, every hope I have for my future is gone. And so those are sort of the circumstances leading up to Esther becoming the queen. She did win the beauty pageant. She became the new queen. The king liked her more than all of the other women. So she won grace and favor because of God. God is never mentioned in the book of Esther, not once. So it's a very interesting book. It's a little bit different, but you can see his hand throughout the entire story. So I think that's really representative of our times today, that we sometimes feel like in our lives, I don't see God. Where is he? Is he at work? What is he doing? This book is a reminder that even though he is never mentioned, we don't see his name once or see him at work directly, that he is at work always behind the scenes. He is setting up these situations and these circumstances. So Esther won grace and favor by the king because of God. He put her in that place to then basically save the Jews. So the plot then goes that a man, high rank next to the king, was offended by actually Esther's uncle, Mordecai, and he wanted to eliminate all of the Jews. So he wanted to have a day to kill off all of the Jews, and the king agreed to it. And when Mordecai, who is Esther's uncle, found out about it, he was distraught. He pleaded to Esther to go into the king and ask for him to have mercy and not kill the Jews. The only problem is culturally, no one could go in or request to see the king unless he had called for them. So if she went in to see him without being called for, she risked death, because the punishment of going into the king without being called for was death. So in thinking about what she should do, should she go in and talk to the king even though he hadn't called for her? She was speaking to her uncle Mordecai, and this is what he said to her in Esther 4, starting in 13. Do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise up for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this. That is probably the most famous line in Esther, that she came to the palace for such a time as this. But I just want to point out in that statement too that Mordecai was sure, he was certain that God was going to save the people, whether or not Esther decided to talk to the king or not. So how could he be so sure? Well, again, God had made the promises that he was bringing about his Savior, the Messiah King, would come through the line of the Jews through Abraham and his family. So Abraham was way back in the beginning in Genesis, and he was the father of the Jews, and so his lineage, basically the Jews or the Israel population grew and grew and grew. And so now, even after being in exile, it's a long history, which I'm not going to go through now, but you are always free to message me if you want to talk more or go into depth about these nuances. But basically, the Jews had grown. They had been exiled out of their land, and then this is sort of where the story was, is when they were in exile, and the king was threatening to eliminate all of the Jews in the area. But God had already promised way back in Abraham to bring a Messiah king through his lineage. So Mordecai was certain that God was not going to eliminate the entire nation of Israel, because he had already promised his king was coming. So Mordecai, was certain that God would raise up someone to save the Jews, whether or not it was Esther. But he proposed, well, maybe God put you in this place for such a time as this. So that is the big takeaway too, is that we are all put into our place, circumstances, the relationships we have, the difficulties that we're going through, that is setting us up to be in a position for God to use us if we are willing. So what was Esther's reply to that? Well, she asked Mordecai to go to the people and asked them to have 3 days of fasting and of prayer for her. So they, all the Jewish people in that area fasted, they prayed, and then she decided on the third day that she would go approach the king. And then how did she reply? In Esther 4:16, she says, "If I perish, I perish." So she was willing to die to make this request of the king. And her request worked. He granted her favor. After some other circumstances that you can read in the rest of the book of Esther, basically the Jews were saved. So her request was granted, and she did save the day. So we have to think too, okay, so God worked through all of those circumstances. The fact that she was an orphan under Mordecai, her uncle. She won a beauty pageant out of probably thousands of young ladies in the entire area or region. She became queen. she found favor in the king's eyes when she approached him to, when she wasn't supposed to. So all of those things God had put in place to save his people. And so when we can consider what should we do when we are faced with difficult situations, know that God is at work, even if we don't see him directly, even if we can't understand everything all in the moment. He is always at work. He is there. He is working to set things up for his ultimate plan and his goal. That doesn't always mean that it's our personal plan and personal goal, but we just have to trust too that we know that God is at work bringing about his perfect plan. And since we know and love him through our relationship with Jesus Christ, then we know that we can trust his plan, even though it might seem scary, even though it might seem difficult, even though it might seem that he is not even present. We can know and trust him and love him and be faithful to him, to walk in whatever he calls us to do, because we know that he is trustworthy and that all of his purposes are because of love for us and love for us. He created us because he loved us so much. So anyway, I just wanted to sort of throw that out there, all of my thoughts about Esther that I just read recently. And again, as always, if you would like to discuss that more in depth, or if you're going through some difficult times yourself and you need someone to talk to, then please reach out. You can go to www.prunedtogrow.com and you can check our availability for counseling. If you don't find availability on the website that works with your schedule, I encourage you to email or call, and we can set something up that works for when you are available.